Ladies and gentlemen, in person and online, let's welcome Mr. Steve Maxime.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'm a stickler for time, so I have my timer on. No, I have a story to tell. Again, when the whole subject of food sovereignty came up, I was really thrilled because Andrea did not mention it. But this concept, this view of food sovereignty started with an organization in Latin America called Via Campesina. And in the 1990s, I was a member of WINFA, which at the time was the largest Windward Islands Farmers Association. And we were affiliate members of Via Campesina. So that I've been involved in food sovereignty, the concept, since the very beginning. Another aspect of it is that what I find so interesting about this panel is that the two presenters are actively involved in the topic. So it's not as if you have a researcher and an academic, or two academics or two researchers. Andrea is involved in practical terms, and I fortunately am involved in practical terms as well. Our interest in food sovereignty and in social and solidarity enterprises was structured primarily along fair trade. As I mentioned, I was on the board of WINFA when we introduced fair trade bananas to the Windward Islands. And when you think about a cooperative model, when you think about a model where no individual farmer could become a member or a producer in fair trade, you had to belong to a fair trade group. And one of the early governance principles we saw was that you have a farmer with 200 acres, which is a big thing in this part of the world, sitting next to a farmer with half an acre, and they all have the same rights. They all have one vote. And when you pool those resources and you use what was referred to then as the social premium, which was a means of organizing the economy in such a way that profit wasn't the major motive. And that, to me, is at the core of SSE, of your social and solidarity enterprises. You want to be sure that you want them viable, but you don't want profit as the ultimate, stranglehold on it. So with that being said, how do I fast forward to 2025? I'm currently employed with the PISLM, which is the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management. My title says, on the door says, Climate Smart Agriculture Expert, Climate Smart Agriculture and Marketing Expert. But what that means in real terms is that we have come up with a model to not only improve the food sovereignty aims and goals of 8 countries in the Caribbean, and we are expanding to Soil Care Phase 2 at the end of this year, which will include the other CARICOM member states. But right now, we are operating in 8 states. And we have found mechanisms to ensure that our agricultural production won't be determined by external forces. So you heard Andrea talking about the vertically integrated dairy industry, and I like some of her suggestions, and I'm involved with some of the suggestions, working with the GCNA in Grenada, which is the Grenada Cooperative Nutmeg Association. I've had some dealings with the CPA, the Caribbean Poultry Association, which has major emphasis in Guyana. But the idea of having a food system or an economy that is dominated by local production. And Andrew and I had a discussion recently where I intimated that I tend not to mention food security because that has other implications. I tend to more think about nutrition security because a lot of the stuff that passes as food nowadays really shouldn't even be on the counter. And even in terms of the food import bill that we keep harping about, when you look at some of the items on that bill, they ought not to be there. They aren't really food. But I digress. What we are able to do now is come up with climate smart agriculture models that are our own. A major part of food sovereignty is choice. I think Andrea made that point repeatedly. You have to have choice. And now, in the midst of the climate crisis, we are seeing that choice slipping away. And let me just use one example. There are some well-meaning folks, seriously, some young people in the global north who have been trying to advise us that we ought not to be eating meat, right? Now, unless for religious or health reasons you can't eat meat, I have no problem with that. But if you try to tell me that not eating meat is your contribution against climate change, then you're way off course. So what we have had is that thought leaders looking at how beef and meats are produced in industrialized settings where people cut down acres of forest to run cattle. We in the region, we raise our cattle like lawnmowers, and the bushers and CPEP workers, they're tethered all over the place. So the type of impact they have, is just an example of having people externally tell you what choices you should make in terms of your diet. But in terms of the actual SSE implications, Andrea mentioned decent work. I am telling you that we have asked, and when I say we, I've been working in this sector for more than 40 years. We have asked farmers to make a number of transitions. Not all of them have been just transitions. I remember when I first started, we asked farmers to produce more. You have to be more productive, When we look at the international figures, you're supposed to get 20,000 pounds per acre. How come you guys only getting 1 pound, So we came with all our chemicals and our green revolution paraphernalia. We went to the farmers, and then we wanted them to produce more. It must be, this subsistence thing, the waste of time. So we encourage them, and I'm part of that. I was an extension officer too. I worked at the Agricultural Development Bank here in Trinidad for more than 10 years. So we went out there, we encouraged them to be more productive. And then at some point, after encouraging them to use all of these chemicals, we realized you could be killing people, So you need to dial back the agri-chemicals a little bit. So then I tell them, you must produce more, safer food, And at that time, we had One Health concerns, and people were seeing how many cancers were coming out of all the use of all these herbicides. So we asked them to transition again. And then when we had them producing a lot and producing it safely, we started telling them, we realize you're harming the environment now, So you really need to do another transition and produce more eco-friendly. And now, in the midst of the climate crisis, we have asked them to produce climate smart. Where is all of this leading? I'm saying that we in the Caribbean, and I can speak with a certain amount of authority because, as I said, I'm on the lead of one of those efforts. We have now come up with our indigenous, trademarked, locally owned climate smart agriculture compliant protocols, something called CSAC. And we are in a position now to determine how we produce, what we produce, and still comply with the international standards and the just transition standards that are connected with the Paris Accord, Paris Climate Accord. How does all this dovetail? Because we are now seeing the use of I'm sorry for those of you who are at my first panel this morning, the use of intellectual property and the use of our creative abilities. So that when Andrea spoke about the cheeses, I noticed she mentioned the branding and the fact that brands like Anchor and so, are internationally known, internationally recognized because they respect their intellectual property. They understand the power of branding, the power of owning a process. So that if you come up with a pepper cheese formula, you need to talk to people like me to make sure that, it's trademarked, that if it's a trade secret, you have it registered the proper way with your IP office, etc. So that in terms of how we get social and solidarity economies going, I'm suggesting that we do it by leveraging our intellectual power. As I keep mentioning, and it has been mentioned here in Trinidad many, many times, when I was living here and a member of the Intellectual Property Association here, when land space is limited, as indeed it is in all of our SIDS, not the low-lying countries like Belize and Guyana and Suriname, but in the SIDS, the small island developing states, where land space is limited, head space has to be expanded. We can't be talking about producing commodities in this part of the world. We have to produce niche products, especially branded products. So instead of trying to increase that 15% of the milk production, what Andrea and her colleagues are doing is to make sure that you improve the yogurt and the cheese production, because that is where you're going to be able to leverage your intellectual power, because we don't have the land space, literally don't have the land space in small island developing states. And I'm saying that if one is to embody the spirit of food sovereignty, it means that you not only grow what you eat and eat what you grow, but you make a conscious choice based on your culture, based on your heritage, your Garifuna. You know, you understand the links between Garifuna and cassava. You understand if you're Wayaka in Guyana, what are some of the links with the traditional produce, your things out of your charm garden, and so that you understand the concept of food sovereignty in the context of SSE is that you want to democratize the production systems, whether it be cooperatives, amalgams of cooperatives, groups, or registered people as part of a smart contract. And that would be my final point. We are at the stage now where we have developed protocols for smart contracts that will utilize blockchain technology, distributed ledger technologies, 256 hashing, and we have self-executing contracts now that can be operated within a cooperative setting, where the farmers in the cooperative no longer will have trust issues because of the blockchain and distributed ledger technologies based on an Ethereum platform. So I'm saying that food sovereignty, not only is it a concept that was born out of Via Campesina and was taken on by WINFA and other farmers' organizations, it is a reality now, and it is a reality steeped in the possibilities of having social and solidarity economies built upon cooperative operations. Thank you.